My name is Rahman, and I'm a professor of supply chain management at the College of Business and Law, RMIT University. This morning, we are going to discuss on sustainability. In general, what does sustainability mean to us? How does this concept fit with the global sustainable development goals that has been prescribed by UN recently? Is sustainability changing the workplace environment into the future? What should we teach our new graduates? In other words, what sort of competencies and the skills that our new graduate should have in order to pursue sustainability practices in the current environment and in the future? We'll be discussing these issues with one of the experts from KPMG, and who is sitting right beside me is Amanda McAlister. Amanda, before we formally ask you or get into the conversation on sustainability, would you mind introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current work and task? Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. So I work in the Climate Change and Sustainability Services team at KPMG. I am a manager there. In terms of the work that we cover, it's a broad umbrella under sustainability. It's everything from climate risk, decarbonisation, sustainability strategy, ESG strategy, responsible investments, property, energy and infrastructure, environmental management, compliance, health and safety even, circular economy, and sustainability reporting, which is a large area in and of itself, so covering materiality assessments and sustainability reporting assurance. So it's a broad scope of work that we cover. Okay.
Is it fair to say that corporate social responsibility and ethical aspects are also very much part of the sustainability aspects? Am I correct?
Absolutely. I think corporate social responsibility as a term is something that's quite interchangeable with sustainability. It's really dependent on context. It's really dependent on the organization and how they frame sustainability within their organization. So definitely something that is relevant, but again, comes down to context.
Okay. Just let's start with a very basic understanding of sustainability, because I believe that still the community perhaps may not have a clear understanding what sustainability really means to them. So would you mind just explaining the concept of sustainability in general?
Very difficult to do. And as I mentioned, again, this is really about context and about what impact means for that organization or that business. So a good way to sort of frame it is creating non-financial value, or even creating financial value, but really it's about the non-financial aspects of a business and the way it operates. So, if you look at like the way companies report on performance, there will be, at the end of every year, there's financial performance. So you understand, how much money the company made and costs were, things like that. But everything outside of that kind of falls under that sustainability umbrella, under non-financial performance. So that can be, again, an indication of why my role at KPMG covers so much, is because that's everything that's like non-financial to a business, and again comes down to value creation. So this is where it becomes really important for businesses and organizations to have thorough procedures to properly assess what's going to be relevant for them in order to understand how they can make an impact.
Okay. So in other words, we can possibly think around environmental aspect, of sustainability. We can also possibly say that it is the social aspect, as you have mentioned, value creation for social area as well as the environmental aspect. And also, as you have touched on, that yes, organization would be talking about and addressing the economic aspect. So taking that as a broader context of sustainability, can we then say that it is sustainability which looks into the environmental and social aspects along with the economic aspects?
Absolutely.
And in other words, that is what we call triple bottom line.
Triple bottom line, or ESG even.
Right, okay, yes. That's another way of describing, and that is, in other words, is a new way of describing triple bottom line.
Yeah,
fantastic. Correct. Yeah, okay. Okay. Now, where does sustainability fit with these UN prescribed several goals of sustainability, as they call it, Sustainable Development Goals? And would you mind explaining to us that where in general the concept of sustainability fits with those goals? And if you could tell also that how those goals are some of the major goals which are, I believe, that can be applied across all societies and all communities. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So the UN SDGs are, not only relevant but important to businesses, because businesses have the resources, creativity, and ability to innovate in this space in order to create impact. So by being able to identify areas that they wish to impact through the SDGs, they're able to sort of identify, where their North Star is of what they want to achieve long term and what they want to impact long term, which is why it comes back again to what I mentioned earlier about context. So not all businesses shouldn't identify all the SDGs as saying we want to be able to touch on all of these in terms of what impact we want to generate. It's about trying to identify where can we be most effective, where can we target our efforts in the pursuit of both value creation and also having a positive impact on the planet and society. So in order to identify these things, there's rigorous processes and procedures which companies implement in order to identify these areas they wish to target. And that in turn, produces innovative, robust, creative solutions to solving really large problems by, setting a long-term strategy, but by being able to build out, interim goals in between while you're achieving that long-term strategy. And that in turn also creates value and credibility for these organizations.
All right. So, as I understand, there are as many as 17 goals of SDG. So, as you have pointed out, that it depends on the organization, so they can pick and choose which are the ones that are relevant for that particular organization to address. So overall, obviously, there is SDG with poverty alleviation and other things which may not be directly relevant to a business, but which is obviously relevant to at a macro level.
Correct.
At a national level. So, in your experience that you have been, that you are working in this particular area of SDGs, which are the SDGs that primarily and that organization are trying to address?
Hard to identify all the trends, but
the major ones.
Broadly,
yes.
Climate action is probably top of the list.
Right.
That is, and that probably indicates something around, sustainability and climate change as a risk to businesses and organizations, and identifying how these businesses and organizations are aiming to mitigate that risk. And therefore building out broader sustainability strategies which are aligned with that SDG.
So the carbon emission, decarbonization process, and those are the things are more important for perhaps a manufacturing organization, or for that matter, a supply chain organization, in other words, so within the logistics industry as a whole. Is that a fair comment to make?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would also argue it's probably applicable to all businesses. I mean, if you want to have a business that has longevity and can transition with the transitioning world, then climate risk is something you need to definitely account for in planning strategic operations.
Right. And in your opinion, is it organizations sometimes see that, well, it is costly for them to address those things. It requires investment and other things, and therefore they are a little bit reluctant to go ahead with to addressing some of those things. These are some of if you could identify some of the challenges of addressing SDG and sustainability in general.
Yeah, reluctant is probably a good term. I think it comes with scale and therefore like ability to have impact. So it is a large investment that companies would need to make, and you know, in order to get yourself to that position, there's a level of maturity that you need to have in your organization and business in order to impact what you want to impact. You know, if you're an organization that's still trying to, you know, turn a profit or get up and running, there's, you know, it's not going to be the first thing that gets integrated, right? It's like you need the business. So that's often a focus that comes in once a business or an organization is more mature. So that being said, the investment itself can also yield cost-effective results because you're looking for efficiencies, because the pursuit of decarbonisation is improving efficiencies throughout the business, whether it's like energy efficiencies or operational efficiencies, which can be, cost-effective.
Right. So although we may see that this is a kind of a huge investment to start with for the organization on a short term, but on a long term, they would see the benefit of their investment in terms of triple bottom line and things like that.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So in other words, we should have industry in general should have a little bit of patience, and they should invest into this area as much as possible and look for the long-term benefits, both economic, environment, and social aspect. Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Yes, we see also that the technology that right now, some of the technologies as we identify them as emerging technologies, and also we say that these are disruptive technologies as well. From our own research that we have seen that technology play a bigger role or a critical role in implementing sustainability. So is it okay to say that sustainability could be now as a key factor for innovation?
Absolutely. I mean, if you put it in the context of the Paris Agreement and the pursuit of net zero by 2050, to decarbonize your business or your organization or your operations is to be innovative. You have to find, you know, both economic and technological solutions in order to achieve that. And you see that through, you know, looking at renewable energy options to power your business, or looking at, you know, replacing your vehicle fleet with electric vehicles or things like that, you know, and things that achieve both things, innovation and decarbonisation. On the other side, you know, other innovations are in the financing space. So, you know, being able to finance this through like sustainability linked loans, for example. So loans that are tied to strong sustainability performance, which, your electric vehicle fleet, for example, would be ticking that box.
Right.
Another financial tool that gets used is like green loans, which are different to sustainability linked loans, which are loans designed to fund green projects. So really, lots of ways to decarbonize, lots of options. But I suppose the more you pursue sustainability, the more options there are available to you.
Is it going to, in other words, from a social perspective, then the generation of new opportunities, for example, with new technologies that comes and would play a greater role as well? Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of this stuff is emerging. So, the presence of these solutions, pursuing technological solutions through these new financing solutions are only becoming more and more robust as more companies take these up or find ways to sort of find effective pairings of the two, because again, technology requires investment, so it definitely comes hand in hand, and the more companies that take up these commitments to net zero, the more they venture down that path.
Okay. Earlier, Amanda, you have mentioned the term circular economy, I remember. And could you tell us a little bit more how circular economy is actually, what does that mean, and how is it actually contributing, the practice of circular economy would contribute to sustainability?
So this circular economy really tackles waste and resource recovery, that aspect of the sustainability umbrella. And again, new, evolving, emerging work that comes out of this space, but really being able to incorporate, the circular economy into sustainability strategies tackles an area that is often left out. So it in and of itself, you're sort of able to have a much more holistic look at all the facets of sustainability. Because presently, a lot of sustainability strategies look at, greenhouse gas emissions, so scope 1, 2, and 3, and resource and waste recovery is something that's captured under scope 3 emissions. But what if you were able to sort of, be more innovative in that space and be able to recover more there? How would that look like in terms of, what would that look like in terms of sustainability performance under, these KPIs that a lot of companies set for themselves? So it's a space that, because it's emerging, there's still so much to come with that, but, very exciting stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I like the term that you use, that circular economy, looking at in a holistic manner, and that's what we also, supply chain management, we call that. Yes, the sourcing the raw material and then producing and then distributing and then consumption, if we call that as a forward supply chain, then taking it back and the reprocessing the material in terms of scrap metal or reuse the product. In other words, we are keeping the material much longer in our supply chain, in our economy, to make more value. And if we put that one together, that one, if we call that as reverse supply chain, then together the forward and the reverse supply chain would make a closed loop supply chain.
Well, and the supply chain is notoriously the most difficult thing to be able to keep track of, in terms of, companies that sort of say these are our greenhouse gas emissions that relate to our supply chain, but it's like, how deep can you go? Because there's it's kind of like an endless, it's an endless string.
Exactly.
So it's notoriously very, very difficult. So a circular economy, definitely works to address a lot of those problems.
Amanda, so far we have been talking about circular economy. You did mention earlier that sustainability reporting and disclosure reporting is very much a part of KPMG's work. Could you tell us how organizations in Australia are reporting and what is the value of reporting sustainability?
Oh, the value is that it's critical. It goes hand in hand with, reporting, financial performance and then your non-financial performance. And that's where sustainability reporting falls under. So if you look at any annual report for any company, there will be that blend. Traditionally it was an annual report and then they introduced sustainability reports would be a separate report. And now we're seeing one integrated report. And that really shows you the value of how these sustainability metrics compare to the financial metrics. It's one and the same, and as we mentioned previously, the sustainability performance goes hand in hand with like the actual financial value of the company. So it's highly critical to an organization to ensure that the reporting is robust, it's transparent, it's comprehensive, and it's showing progress against identified goals and targets such as the SDGs.
Right. Okay. In other words, organization producing sustainability report, meaning that they are making themselves a little bit more transparent to the community, to the industry as a whole, and being more accountable on their practices on social and environmental and economic aspect at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to say that, we want to reduce our emissions by 50%, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence of the progress that you're doing that and how you're doing that? So transparency is key.
Recently, we did a study with the top logistics companies in Australia, and we found that we tried to look at the level of disclosure, both environmental and social, and try to relate that or correlate that with their financial performance. And we found that, yes, some of the organizations are doing pretty well. In other words, they are practicing at a high level, and we could see that there is a correlation with their return on asset, for example, or the profit growth, something like that. And that these value are actually real value for the organization. So we term them as a leader, perhaps, in the industry, But interestingly, that we also found that some of the organizations are struggling. They are practicing and disclosing and reporting a lot at a higher level, but we did not find that is actually translating into economic aspect, return on investment and things like that. Any idea that why some are facing challenges in this regard?
I mean, hard to say. Could be a lot of different things, but this is where you've got to be careful that I'm not trying to accuse this company of greenwashing, but this is where the greenwashing comes in, right? You've got really strong communications of these things, but is it actually translating into the business? How do these things correlate, and therefore, is what you're reporting actually meaningful? So, perhaps what they've targeted isn't actually material to the business that they are in terms of what they could be impacting. So, I would argue that there's probably a disconnect in what they've identified as being material or what they're communicating to be material versus what actually is material to them.
I possibly would agree with you on that. And maybe from the governance perspective, there could be some issue with that. So they still, and interestingly that use the term greenwashing. And would you mind explaining that a little bit so that community and we understand what it means?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of a simple way to explain it. It's making baseless claims, really. So claims that can't be evidenced or are not actually tangible to how the business actually operates. So, you know, again, this is why we do a lot of work in the sustainability reporting space to ensure or to, you know, mitigate the risk of greenwashing. So we check every claim in a report that's related to sustainability disclosure, check the processes behind it, so all the governance processes, all the reporting processes, all the systematic processes, to ensure that what they're saying, they actually do. So that's how a lot of companies mitigate that risk. So companies that make claims and don't do any process to actually review their own, their own internal systems or to review their own claims are at risk of greenwashing.
Right, okay. Amanda, we talked about technology before, and from our own research and readings, we found that some of the technologies which you call as disruptive technologies, such as 3D printing, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and blockchain, and those are the technologies, if organization implement, then there's a likelihood that they would be much more sustainable in terms of waste management, in terms of reducing the carbon emission or the greenhouse gas emission, and so on and so forth. How do you, what are the evidence that would have the relationship between implementation of digital technology or the emerging technology and sustainability?
I guess the implementation would be anything that improves the way the company or the business operates. So, and again, this comes back to like sustainability reporting. You can measure these things, right? So you can measure the chosen methodology is through greenhouse gas emissions. So you can look at your greenhouse gas emissions before you implement a technology, and then after you've implemented it, and you can see how it compares. And again, will totally come down to the chosen solution, because this will have varied outcomes. And this is how you can sort of tell a good approach from a bad one, because, well, I shouldn't say a bad one, maybe I should say like a less effective approach, because a less effective approach will look to decarbonize the business or improve the sustainability operations of a business, and then whatever they can't capture in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, they'll use carbon offsets to offset the rest. But a good strategy will try and cover off as much of those greenhouse gas emissions as possible through this strategy or through this like technological solution. And the more that you can capture that in a more direct way, indicates that the solution or the strategy or the technology implementation is of a higher quality or is more effective.
Okay. So it is not simply the technology itself, but organization must have the right strategy to implement the technology in a meaningful way in order to achieve the sustainability goals at the same time, some of these economic objectives of the organization.
Yeah. Like it really has to be targeted, because you could implement any solution and say that, or any technology and say we're being sustainable, but what does that mean? You know, like just because something has some sort of like green identity or green branding to it, and it might not be actually tangible to how your business operates, then it's a bit meaningless. So that's why it just needs to be really targeted and context specific.
Right. Okay. And we see that with the implementation of sustainability practices and the emerging technology in an organization, the organization and the workplace environment is actually drastically being changed. So how are you going to cope with that, with the change of the organization, workplace environment, and things like that?
Yeah, you know, changing behavior is a really difficult thing to do, and building in sustainability, you know, into the internal functions of roles can be challenging if that wasn't already there. So this is why having a really specific strategy, or not specific, but a really targeted strategy is really important, because that strategy needs to speak to all the business units and all the roles in order to be focused on achieving the same outcomes, which is, you know, in the case that we're talking about, is like improving the sustainability of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, we have been talking about sustainability practices and there's emerging technology and how both technology and the sustainability practices are changing the work environment. Now, the question is that how should we prepare our graduate, into this space so that they can handle sustainability and address appropriately in order to create value for the organization?
So, because it's such a broad space, it's really important to find an area of focus that is something that you're passionate about, or something that is pulling you in, or something that is aligned to maybe like past experience that you have. For us, we have a lot of people that have like environmental engineering backgrounds. We have chemical engineers. We have people who can do climate modeling and climate risk assessments. We have EHS professionals, people who can build environmental and safety management systems. And these all come from people that have identified areas that they were particularly interested in and built a skill set around that. And then from there, your knowledge and your ability to have greater impact across the sustainability space grows, because your capabilities grow, because you've built a foundation with a focus on an area that you were interested in. So that's my advice, is to find an area that you're interested in, build the skill sets around that, and then be able to grow your career from there.
Right. So in other words, if we say that reporting is an important aspect, then of course they should be aware of the framework for reporting and understand what needs to put in there and how the reporting system should be managed and things like that. If some organization is interested in looking at from input-output perspective of, say, greenhouse gas emission, they may think about using a product life cycle analysis and things like that.
Absolutely. Going back to reporting is you need to familiarize yourself with what's involved. Look through any annual report and you can sort of gauge what you'd need to know about. So having an understanding of the nuance behind what goes into Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, Scope 3 emissions, where are companies headed for in terms of what the new categories that they want to start reporting on. There's discussions around Scope 4 emissions, which is avoided emissions. So being able to have in-depth understanding of that area would be key.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Amanda. So far we have been talking about sustainability. As Amanda has mentioned, that it is a very broad area to address. And of course, we do understand that it is not simply a very broad aspect, but it is also very complex and something which are very interdependent. And that's why we say that it is a triple bottom line. So in other words, we have on one hand environmental aspect, the social aspect, and the economic aspect. And we got to make sure there is a balance between all these three different perspectives of sustainability. We try to cover from the very concept of sustainability to understand how sustainability is related to SDGs goal and how sustainability practices are being reported. And this has become a major issue now for the organization globally. And how then we try to cover also that how sustainability and the technology is changing the work environment, and hence what are the skills and the competencies that our new graduate should acquire and achieve in order to face the challenges of the future organizational environment. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda, once again for your input into this. This was a great session, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you.